AI for Communities is a collaboration between San Mateo County Libraries and Women in AI Ethics. As Van just shared, Women in AI Ethics, the news headlines are filled with AI, right? Every day everybody is talking about artificial intelligence. Every conversation seems to sooner or later gravitate just towards what's happening in the headlines, what's happening in artificial intelligence, is this, but so much of it is hype, and it's hard to tell which part is real or someone is just trying to sell you on the latest and greatest technologies that they believe is the latest and greatest. So today we'll demystify a lot of these myths and we'll get right down to the core of what is real and what isn't real. So today we are talking about generative AI. Last week's session was introduction to artificial intelligence and algorithms. And today we'll do a brief intro to artificial intelligence, and no worries if you missed the last class, we'll go over the basics. Women in AI Ethics is an organization I started in 2018 because we have heard that there are not enough women in STEM, there are not enough women working in the tech industry, and all of that is true. But at the same time, 1/3 of the tech workforce is women. And there are a lot of women in the AI space, especially the responsible AI and ethics space, who do a great job. They do great work, and somehow their work does not get acknowledged. So our mission is to make sure that we are elevating those voices, making sure that artificial intelligence, there are these powerful technologies which need to be ethical, they need to be diverse, and they need to be inclusive, so we are not leaving people behind. So we elevate their work. We also make sure the industry is staying more diverse. You can reach me. You can find out more information about us on our website, womeninaiethics.org, or you can reach me at diversityinai@gmail.com. I'll get started. Today is going to be a very fun session. We'll start off with the introduction to machine learning algorithms. So this is the part if you missed last time, no worries, we got you. Artificial intelligence, first of all, is not a thing. When we start off some of these classes, people are like, we're going to find this thing that people are talking about it in the news. And it's not a thing. It's not something you can just download. It is a broad discipline. It's a field of study under computer science. Now, what does it study? It studies, it's a study and the development of machines that can do tasks like problem solving, statistical analysis, and what have you. But these are tasks that requires more human type intelligence. So I'm not saying that artificial intelligence is human intelligence, because human beings are way more smart and way more intelligent and complicated. But the goal of artificial intelligence as a field is to get to that level, get to the intelligence of a human being. Machine learning is just layers, right? Like onions. You just peel one layer. It's computer science is a broader field. Artificial intelligence is under that. But most of the time, when people say artificial intelligence, they're really talking about machine learning. And that is a subfield of AI, which allows machines to do these tasks without being programmed. And we'll talk more about that, but that's very important because computing started with machines having to be coded. And even if you're not a coder, I'm sure you've heard of a lot of coding camps, programming, which is so hard, the tech industry. But we've evolved from the days of computing where everything is manually coded to now machines you don't need that kind of explicit programming. And I'll share with you how they do it. There are two parts to it, but mainly there are a lot of powerful algorithms that help machines do the tasks without being programmed. And a lot of these models, artificial AI models, are trained on tons of data. So when you see headlines that say, so-and-so artist is very upset or suing some tech company for using their work without permission, without using their work without consent, what they're saying is when you're building these models, the data that you're using to test these models and train these models and test these models is based on that artist's work. And again, we'll go into deeper into all of that, but I'll just want to help you connect the dots between what you read in the news and what is actually going on. Okay, so just taking a brief pause here, and we talked a lot about algorithms. Is you might remember this from last time when we talked about what are algorithms. These are just recipes, the way you think about things, and we'll see how they work. But they're everywhere. You can't get away from algorithms, AI or no AI. You go apply for a housing loan, right? Your mortgage, you apply for a loan. That's decided by algorithm. You want to go onto the social media feed. You don't see all the posts, the instas from all your friends first. You only see what the platform serves up to you. The platform or the company, the tech company that owns the platform decides what you get to see. Search engine, same thing. If you pay, you can get to the top. You can have the paid advertising on the top, and then it can serve up based on whatever criteria they deem is important and relevant. They serve up. So you can't escape it. Movie recommendations, stock market recommendations. Just to give you an idea, algorithms themselves are not new. So when we talk about algorithms, what we're actually saying is this is a recipe, right? Like just if you remember nothing about AI or algorithms, remember that this is a step-by-step recipe, direction that you give to a machine to tell it what to do. You can be problem solving, you can have a process for doing some task and so on. So that is a recipe. And I love sharing my cat's decision-making tree. That is one of decision trees are a popular algorithm as well. And this is just a fun one. How a cat makes a decision. Is this for me? Yes, no. It doesn't matter. It's always for me. Imagine you're trying to make a decision about should I eat this cake or should I eat that pastry? Oh, you're on a diet. So, no, maybe not, and so on. So, the way human brain makes the decisions, that's just captured in a graphical form. A recommendation for a movie, right? Even that is a type of decision tree that you're going through all the pros and cons. Is this a good movie? Oh, no, she's looking for a romantic movie. Okay, so that won't work. Oh, what kind of romance and so on and so forth. Uh, so we go back to our chart and we continue our journey. Deep learning. Deep learning is part of machine learning, but what they use within deep learning is neural nets. Neural nets are designed like the human brain, like how you have neurons in your brain that actually help with the processing. Even if you knew nothing about how your brain functions, like at least you know the processing that happens in your brain. So the original neural net, like this, say, is your brain, the processing that happens. So everything else is artificial. And when we say ANNs, artificial neural nets, they are able to do a lot of complex processing, and they use a lot of data, lots and lots of data. And the reason these computation models they're inspired by human brains, and human brains are very complex. They are also very complex. So the deep learning means how many layers of these the data have to go through, and how many parameters or variables you use to make decisions. Like we said, right? Are you trying to say the decision tree we talked about? Should you have candy, not to have candy? Super simple. But imagine a world where you're making so many decisions, right? In a platform, you're making a social media platform, so many decisions to make. What kind of data you want, what kind of content should we serve up to you? So that's where artificial neural nets are very powerful. They allow you to process tons more data, a lot more data than many of the predecessors did. Let me keep moving. So what is generative AI? This has been a lot in the news lately. Everybody's talking about it. And we'll talk about why and what's really involved. So this is an exercise I do. I do ask people to see if they are able to tell whether it's A or B, which one is real or fake. But we don't have any sharing features enabled right now because we are recording it. Um, but so I'll just tell you, but I'll give you a few seconds to just process and just look at these images and say, can you tell based on what's on the screen in front of you if if these are real images or fake images. Is A real? Is B real? Or are they both fake? And the answer is both of them are fake images. So there is a site called StyleGAN, and that the site is called the site. You can look up these images on a site called This Person Does Not Exist.cc. StyleGAN is the algorithm used to develop these faces, fake faces. These are fake human faces. This person does not exist, but you can see how terrifyingly real this person looks. And NVIDIA is the company, yes, the chip maker company, which is always in the news these days, is the company that actually created this site. And this is the algorithm that they have developed is the one which forms the basis for a lot of deepfake images that you've been seeing in the news. And again, the site is open. You can definitely go check it out. And I have links. At the end of the session, I'll give you all the links. It's all online. You can go in, you can test it out, try it out. So where does generative AI fit, right, in the structure that we just looked at? It's right at the core of deep learning. So a lot of generative AI is a subset of this deep learning where you can create AI models with, like the name suggests, can generate things, generate images, you can generate music, you can also use these to generate text. But also remember that these are not original machines. This is like not, AI is not original. There's no originality there, no matter what they tell you. It's always trained on data sets, which means it's always trained on someone else's content. Yes, companies do have their own data. They can get consent and they can get synthetic data, which is fake data, but they all come with their own challenges, and that's only the minority of the cases that they have it. But most of this creation builds on somebody else's work. Okay. So let's talk about deep learning techniques, and I'll go through this really quickly, but just so you know, within generative AI, there are different types of, like, there are deep learning techniques that are used, and I just want to differentiate between the two. Is when you use discriminative deep learning techniques, that is used to discriminate. For example, it's like not discriminate in the bad sense, but just that it's making a differentiation between the different data sets that you're given the model. For example, you have a cat in front of you, right? So it will tell you, is this a cat? Is this not a cat? Okay, it's a cat. It can learn relationships, but generative, where it's different is it can generate actual content, pieces of content, text. It can learn patterns, your facial patterns, right? Like based on your face, it can create more images like you and so on and so forth. So here's a picture of a cat. It can create a new picture of a cat, right? So that's the difference between discriminative, which tells you what it is, versus generative, which will actually create another version of the content you give them. We talked about generative adversarial networks last time, GANs. These are these are critical because this forms the basis for a lot of the generative AI work that you see. This was introduced in 2014 by Ian Goodfellow, I believe he worked at Google. So they were trying to generate deep learning images. So you saw this image already, right? The StyleGAN. So generative adversarial networks are these machine learning frameworks where you have two different neural nets. Remember, we talked about how neural nets are created. They're super powerful algorithms. So they are constantly working against each other. So the generator, there are two. There's a generator, there's a discriminator. The generator creates the image. The discriminator tests it. And until you get it to perfection, it keeps going. The loops keeps going, going, going. So this is how what I'm showing you on the screen is very much if you had an image of a kitty cat, what it does is the generator network actually takes that. Noise is just basically is taking in. I hate to use the word inspiration, but it's taking that data point. It's taking that, it is creating another image The discriminator network is going to tell it whether or not it is good, is it accurate, does it meet the criteria that has been set up internally, and then it keeps going until the image becomes as close to perfection as possible. So basically it tells you, is it a cat, is it not a cat? If you're generating something, is it a good image, is it not a good image? That's how deepfakes or any kind of synthetic data is created, or how it generates. So I'll keep going. This is something I'm just to keep in your pocket, just knowing where things come from and who are the humans who created a lot of this and why we are seeing so many developments. There were researchers, and none of them are, they were at Google at that time, but none of them are at Google anymore. They published a paper called Attention is All You Need. If you ever have a question about what do AI researchers actually do, this is what they do. They are the ones who come up with these, sometimes groundbreaking, sometimes just benign, like some sort of advancement in the technologies being used through their research. So what they did was, in their paper, Attention is All You Need, they introduced Transformer, which is a new architecture which is used now for natural language processing. So what I mean by advancement is, what are the different types of advances you can make? You can make faster computing, faster, like it's just more speed or more efficiency, that it requires less computing power, requires maybe less data, it can do more. So there are many ways you can make a model efficient. And there's where the breakthrough natural language processing. Again, I'll give you a link, and some of them, it's not a they're complicated, but if you just read it, can give you the gist of what exactly this is, if you're so interested. I always provide links for you to read through at your own time. And here we'll take a pause and just look at where we came from, right? So traditional programming is you input code at one end, and then you get the output at the other end. If you have done coding, or if you're familiar with coding, it's always garbage in, garbage out. So whatever nonsense you put in there, if your code has errors and any kind of mistakes and so on, the output is going to be garbage. But that is how traditional programming works. What traditional machine learning changed all of that, and it went from the components of traditional machine learning, without making it overly complicated, you have algorithms which are trained on data sets, and the algorithms can be supervised. You can use labeled data sets. You can use for unsupervised, unlabeled data sets. Semi-supervised uses some combination. Reinforcement is just, in gaming, right? Like think about Pac-Man. How you have good behavior, bad behavior, you have a reward system, right? If you can get rewards, or you can get eaten up. So something like reinforcement learning is used a lot in gameplay, but you don't have to know how each one of these constructed, but what you do need to know is every algorithm. When you say AI, we are talking data, massive amounts of data. So all of these are used to train a data set, which can be acquired in so many different ways. And we'll talk about it a little more later. And then it's created, you use that to create a machine learning model based on whatever is the problem you're trying to solve. And what can you do with that? You can predict, you can classify, you can cluster. That is the output, right? Traditional machine learning. Generative AI model is, again, takes it to the next level. So not only does it take input in, it takes data in, and it works on it, and you have these models being created which can do certain things. The transformer architecture became this foundation for ChatGPT. You're hearing about it everywhere, right? So have you ever wondered what the GPT stands for? It's generative pre-trained transformer. It's based on the architecture that I just talked to you about. And that is the foundation for a lot of these large-scale language models, which is LLMs. And you hear that a lot too. And don't worry, if you don't remember, don't recall, there's no quiz, there's no test. You're the only person. This is for your information and education. I have a glossary for you. You can go through it and say, oh, what did she say? What did Mia talk about? What was that thing she said? LLM. Okay, what is an LLM? There's a glossary and definition for LLMs and so on. I also have resources. So every link that I'm sharing with you right now, It's all in your resources, so don't worry about it. So we have data, right? So how it works is very simply this. You have a data, and we talked about how it's used in training data set. So you're training the model, but the advancements in this field have now brought us to a point where you don't even need to write code. I mean, you and I don't, we don't need to write code. All we have to do is put in a prompt, a natural language prompt, right? And it will generate content. It's done all the work for you. It's been programmed. It has already been set up. It's been pre-trained. No work required from you. All you're doing is going in, putting in your prompts, and if the model's already built, boom, you have your content. And that's basically the magic, the secret sauce of how a lot of these models are built. Whether you have OpenAI, it's a ChatGPT, which is built on the GPT-3 model. So the version keeps changing as they get better and better. Of course, there are the first version is always bad, always is buggy, has so many issues, but it keeps getting better and better. Google's bird. So I think some people had a question. What do you think of foundation models, frontier models, and frontier AI, and foundation models? I believe it was Stanford that came out with that term, foundational models. And when they're talking of foundational, this is essentially what they're referring to. So see, now you know, when people are talking about it in the news, now you have the vocabulary, you know what those words mean. So we'll keep going. So applications of generative AI. So how can you use it? Tons of options, tons of opportunities. You're limited only by your imagination. So let's go from left to right. I got this from Google's website, so you can look at the, on their site. And they have a lot of free lessons content for you if you ever wanted to go further and take more classes. Every tech company right now is providing free classes right now. Don't pay. Once you're ready to have a serious career or something, it's okay, but don't pay. It's go for free content. There are a lot of free content out there. So how you look at from left to right, you can create a lot of content. You can create content, of course, with generative AI applications. So you can go to ChatGPT and you can just start putting in like your prompts, and it will create text for you, emails for you, and so on. It can generate code, it can generate images, it can also generate speech, it can do video editing, it can do 3D modeling, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of applications. So what companies are doing, they're taking the base models, that these foundational models, and they are building on top of it. So again, you're only limited by your imagination here. Keep on going. There are different types of generative AI models. So we go through this really quick because they're fairly simple to understand. Generative AI language models, they learn about patterns in languages through whatever training data sets that are trained on. So then they can predict what you can expect based, like what's the next thing you can expect, right? Like I think a lot of you have already seen it in action, right? When you are trying to type an email or you're on phone, it's always trying to autocomplete. And it's annoying. Sometimes it gets it completely wrong, but that's what I'm talking about. That feature, that's essentially how the language model works. It's not magic. They have a set of data and they've been trained on it and they're trying their best. These models are trying their best to predict what the next word you're thinking of. Again, they're not reading your mind, but that's how it works. So in Google, where you put in any like search results, it will try and autocomplete for you. Generative AI image model. So we talked about language. There's also images. You can put in a prompt and boom, picture of a cat. You can also you can generate images, all sorts of images, images of humans. We saw the deep fake, the fake images that can be created too. The technique, again, there's no quiz, just for your own information. The technique that is used by image models is diffusion models. They basically take what is called a noise. Noise is not like what we hear, it's more of a technical term. So it takes any piece of noise or data point and they take that and convert that into a image or generate images from prompts. So again, that's more of a technical is a technique that they use. But if you ever come across a word like diffusion and such, and there's actually, I think, a company that's also named after it. So that's where it comes from. Prompt engineering. There was a report out there, and it was just so misleading that, companies are hiring prompt engineers for hundreds of thousands. I think it was like some ridiculous six-figure salary. Nobody's hiring anybody. I mean, there might be a few people who are prompt engineering in the title, and people who say they are hiring. But honestly, if one of you gets hired as a prompt engineer for hundreds of thousands of dollars, please send me a note. You have my email address, but it's more of a marketing gimmick at this point more than anything. But I feel like there are people though who there is potential to hire people for regular salaries to actually do some of this work to figure out like what prompts can get you the best results, or at least good results, not worse results. So that is possible, but not the hype. I mean, I think that's the real skill set here. How do you craft that piece of text? So let's talk about prompts. Prompt is just a piece of text that you use to prompt the model to get you a result. And that can be anything. It could be here. Um, let's look at Bard, right? So I put in Bard, which is a Google's generative AI model. And I said, what is Bard? And it says it's a large language model that Google has developed and so on. But then I said, what is a Bard? It is a poet. That's what the Bard, the language model, is based on. So here you see how prompt engineering, how prompts really make a difference to how you craft these. How you craft this matters, because those are the kind of results you'll see. You'll see the difference in results between a good prompt versus a bad prompt. And I wouldn't say bad per se, but it's just not what you're looking for. So there you have it. They'll keep on going. And then sometimes you just hit a limit with these models. They can only do so much. So here I said generate something, but it's a language model. It cannot generate anything. So there, but it was honest, honestly just said, I can't generate images yet, so I'm not able to help you. There have been many instances, especially with ChatGPT. This is Bard. Bard seems to be slightly, like, it's not a person, so I won't use the word honest, but it will yield something like an error message that says, I can't do this. Whereas with ChatGPT, it will make up stuff. And that's called hallucination. And I will talk a little bit more about it later. But if you ever hear in the news, oh, so and so model is hallucinating, what it's doing is it's making up random things and just making up this fake information, because in a way it wants to please you. It wants to give you the information. And the way it's been coded, it has not been coded to say, oh, maybe I don't know that. It doesn't know what it doesn't know because it's a dumb machine, right? So I think the fault lies with the humans, but yeah, we'll talk more about that later. I'll keep going. So prompt engineering can also create these beautiful images for you. Like this is the prompt he used here was cute tropical fish in an aquarium on a dark blue background, and so as a digital art. So there you go. That is basically what you said, like in terms of a prompt, what a human said, and what it came up with. Moving on, text to text. So we talked about Bard. So text to text takes text input and produces text output. But there are challenges though in there. The information, as I mentioned, right? So if you were tracking so far, you remember when I said data sets, it's trained on data sets. And the thing with data sets is they're static. They're not refreshing these massive data sets of millions of like data points, and they have, if it's images, it's millions of images. So what these models are, they're static. So they're trained, these models are trained on the same set of data. So what happens is the content is not fresh. So if you use ChatGPT, it will tell you, as of 2021, this information accurate or something like that. It gives you a sense for it's trying to tell you and warn you that the information over the past 2 years may not be in the data set, which means if you ask me about something that happened yesterday, I'm not going to be able to tell you. The model is not going to be able to tell you. Generative AI models are not search engines. People use it like a search engine. It's more like you have a knowledge base and you're trying to get information from that knowledge base. And it's not your fault either. It's not the public's fault, because tech companies hype up their products so much. Sometimes it's hard to tell, is this reality, or you just try to sell me something? And a lot of times, this confusion occurs because of that inherent conflict. So here's where one example where of results that Bard provides is Bard is by Google. So Google does use search results. ChatGPT is not a search company, or at least not yet, but it does not incorporate any kind of search results. So they're all different. They're not the same, just to give you an example. And where can you use this? Say you're struggling to come up with like story ideas, or struggling with getting started on writing or what have you. These models can be good to get you started. I'm not always thrilled with the quality that I get from them. I feel like it's very mediocre. It's like you're hiring some PR person to write something. It's not authentic, but what can you expect, right? It's a machine. So then text to image models, you put in the text, it creates images. We talked about like how these are image generators. And so these are your different text to image models. And this is basically one of them. Crayon, again, is free. You can go and then you can test it out. I would highly, highly recommend testing things out. When you're scared of something, I'm not talking, I wouldn't jump out of a plane. That is not the kind of fear we want to conquer. Maybe some do, I don't know. But when it comes to things like this, you can do it in a very careful, safe way. You can put in prompts in here, but I would encourage you not to put your private information up there, because these are very flawed systems and models, and they do take your data and keep it. There's nothing to keep them from, using your data by their own, because all the legal language on the site basically says, even social media sites, the information, the content, the data, your images, everything belongs to them, and they keep changing the policy to make it that way. So there you have it. Image generation and editing, these are some free tools. Image to image is another one. It's very interesting. This I found fascinating, and hopefully you will as well. Is we've seen how you can use text prompts to create text prompts to create images. Image to image is something very interesting. You can take something that, like, say you are an artist, architect, for example. So what you can do is you can take an image. This is a rendering, is an architecture rendering, what you're seeing on screen. You can use that to then edit it, and you can use the model to create its version of the ground truth. So you input this image. What the real image, the ground truth, is basically just what the real image in real life looks like. This is what the model comes up with, right? The tool is called Pix to Pix. Again, I have a link and you can check it out. And yeah, so I thought it was fascinating how it can take some of these renderings, and you can do the comparison between what the reality is, what the image looks like. I still like real life better, but again, if you are, say, an architectural firm, if you work for a developer, land developer, when you have this building, like, and we make visual renderings, right? Because the building is not yet ready, the house is not ready. So this might be one way that it could be utilized. One way these models could be utilized to create those renderings, very realistic looking renderings too. But then there's also text to video. And this is a product called Synthesia. I don't think it's free. I believe it's paid, and yeah, I'll have to double check. But what it allows you to do is create, as it says, videos. So we've done text to text, we've done text to images, we've done images to images now. This can also take your text and create a video out of it. It can be used for video generation, obviously, but you can also use it to edit, apparently. I'll be honest, I have not tested it myself. It's just sharing it with you because it exists, and this is something that can be useful if you are in the line of work but requires you to generate AI videos on a budget. This can be something that can be useful. Then let's text tasks. Now, again, this technology keeps evolving, and like I said, you're only limited by your imagination. This is another example of it, where you can take text and you can convert that into a task, and the models can do some tasks for you. One of my favorite ones, I'll share that with you in a second, but You can use them as a virtual assistant for like task automation. So what I did was, I've never been to Italy, always wanted to go, heard a lot of good things about it. So I just put it in there. So I say, okay, build in ChatGPT. I said, my prompt was, build me an itinerary for Italy. And I might have said a few days or something. And yeah, yeah, there's my prompt. Build me an itinerary for Italy. Certainly, it's a beautiful country with a rich history, stunning landscapes, and delicious cuisine. So I've heard too, actually. And folks who have gone there have said so. So it did create me an itinerary. I didn't say 10 day, 5 day. It just decided 10 day was a good time to spend there. Or the training data set might have only 10-day itineraries. So whatever the reason, whatever's in that data set, you're seeing the results right here. I cannot tell you how good this is. I have never been, and therein lies the challenge that this can be completely trash. It can be a horrible itinerary. It might not even work for me. But again, the question here is really around potential of what could be possible. Here we come to good, bad, and ugly. I do have a class next week, same time, where we'll talk about more about the safety risks from these technologies and so on. If you're registered for one, you're registered for all three classes, you're set. Just remember, mark this time, 6 o'clock on your calendar so you don't forget. 6 o'clock Pacific time, for me, it's 9 p.m. As I'm based on the East Coast. All right, so we'll go through this fast because I think we're running out of time. So we talked about content generation, right? Automation, creativity, so many opportunities. But we'll also talk about bias, stereotypes, misinformation, what else bad things can happen. And last but not the least, we'll talk about really, really ugly things that are going on there. You see it in the news and how that's evolving. I don't have a timer in front of me. Just give me a quick second. Okay, we have 15 minutes, so we're not doing that bad. Reality check. So the good, task automation, always good, right? We want to be organized. It can help you get organized. I have been going into using Google spreadsheets. I don't know if you use that. Every time I go in there, it has this little this help bubble, and it's always asking, help me organize, generate templates. Maybe I need help with this, and it's there if anybody wanted to test or try it. It seems decent, but again, it's not built to your how you need it. It's just like giving you some examples. So there's one. And then there is just creation, right? It can take your creativity to a whole other level. So the type of content that it can create. But the bad thing is, one is this is the piece that a lot of AI researchers on responsible and ethical AI working on, a lot of women in our own community, women in AI ethics are working on, is just a bias built into these systems. And if this was more interactive and not being recorded, we could have gone into the whole discussion about bias and just had this discussion about where do you think it comes from. And one big source of bias is in the data sets. Because when the data sets are filled with and these models are trained on very specific kind of image, right? And not all of them, but the majority are white faces with blue eyes. Then when you ask, like the student did, asked AI to make her headshot more professional, it gave her lighter skin, gave her blue eyes. So you see, what it does is amplifies, it basically perpetuates the same stereotypes you see, you have been seeing for all these years, and now they're embedded into these systems. So there you have it. That's a racial blind spot. There's bias in the systems. And then there's a stereotype. This is in the data set. There is an AI researcher, Dr. Abiba Birhane. She does a lot of great work when it comes to data sets and what's in them. She and her colleagues have spent so much time digging into all of these data sets to see what exactly is in there, what are the labels being used, and so forth. And this is from the Common Crawl database that they examined. And again, this is not for the faint of heart. This is a massive data set. It requires a lot of effort to go through it and analyze and just look at, like, interrogate and audit these. And she's done the work, and her colleagues have done the work, and kudos to them. And this is why we know within the data sets, there's so many stereotypical, like, tropes being pushed forward here. This is one. Look at the label for this image. We know this is an astronaut, but according to the data sets and how it's being labeled, this is a photograph of a smiling housewife in an orange jumpsuit with an American flag. And it gets worse, a lot worse. People are labeled with slurs, and it's just horrible. Um, and then here is more stereotypes. So when I shared a tool with you, Crayon, I'm always interested in saying, who do you think qualifies to be a doctor or nurse and so on? So I start putting in, like, show me an image of a nurse. It doesn't show me any men. Men can be nurse too, and women can be doctors. So it does perpetuate a lot of the stereotypes and a lot of the societal um, biases that we've been saying. Because again, this is based on historical data sets, things that have happened. Can things change? Sure. Will things get better? I sure hope so. But at this point, this is all based on historical data. And then there's just the worst thing is the people who are um, affected by it. And this example is of students, where a professor wanted to, the educators are split between, should we use AI? Should we not use AI? Oh, this was their best practice to use AI, or so on and so forth. So there's, like, broad spectrum, and people are at every level, right? So here is a professor who thinks he's so smart. He basically used ChatGPT to review some papers that his students submitted because he suspected they were written by AI. So here's what happens. Remember how I said ChatGPT and these models have been built in a way that they try to please you, and they won't admit when they don't know. These machines don't have an error message that they throw up. Some of them, not all of them, but these models won't throw up an error message that, oh, I don't know this, but instead of that, it will make things up. So here we go. So when the professor puts the papers in there to check whether or not they were written, ChatGPT basically said, yeah, sure, I've written that. And so he flunked all the students. And then ChatGPT also invented a sexual harassment scandal, and it named a real law professor as accused. So again, where it doesn't have data, say you have data and you don't have data, which is the data gap, it just tries to fill it with whatever information it can gather or it's in there. Because again, this is not a rational thinking human being. This is not human intelligence. It's just dumb machine given the ability to look into the data set and predict what will go in a sentence, what is the next thing, and so on. Supposedly, maybe fool people into thinking, oh, they're having an actual conversation. But these are the issues that they come up with, and you should be aware of this. And then the ugly part, right? It all comes down to how much do we value humans and which humans do we value, and, and whose work we value. So these models are being trained, they are being built on the work of others. So the data sets, we call it data sets, we talk about technology, but at the end of the day, some human out there wrote or created a lot of that data. You took an image, you took a photo out there, beautiful sunset photograph, and somebody takes it and decides to make another, like, sell it or what have you, and reuse it for their own purposes. So this is like that. Like Sarah Silverman and so many other artists, creators, are all have concerns, such as legitimate concerns, that if you are going to be taking our work and using it to train these data sets, and then people are going in and they use our work and then create own data set and own images like our images, or write content like our content. So there are so many problems, right? First, you can't use my data without consent. So that's a copyright piece. And then there's a thing about how that content is being misused. So we'll talk more about the safety piece next week. Hope you'll join me again, but this is basically what's going on right now. And then the problem is none of this is confidential. Your privacy is not protected anywhere. And here is the thing. I mean, the tech companies themselves are saying, this is not private. This is all open. Don't put your confidential information in there. Google has already warned its employees, don't be putting things in there that you don't want the world for finding out or others finding out. So there's a huge risk there, and they know it. And then there's the human impact, right? Like environmental impact, the human impact, and we can't ever forget that. The ugly part is always the humans that get impacted. Well, Dr. Timnit Gebru, who's so well known now because she's a very brave individual who pointed out, along with her brave colleagues, and they're super smart. They're not just brave; they're super smart, highly accomplished, leading AI researchers said that these models have an environmental impact because they're becoming bigger and bigger. So when is the bias, what's built into that? We don't know what we don't know. I just showed you so many examples. And I know that because the researchers are doing the work. But when the money dries up, who's going to be doing that research? How will we know? So what they said was we need to consider that as these models get bigger and bigger, they're black boxes. We don't know what's in there. What are the risks? And the second thing, and there were many other things, I've given a link to the actual paper, but fun read. The other thing is the key piece was the environmental impact. So my computer, I just got a new Microsoft Surface, beautiful machine, but oh my golly, it's like within half an hour, it just heats up. Now, computing takes up a lot of energy. It takes up water, it takes up resources, it heats up the environment. And can you imagine, like, when we talk about these machine learning models, we talk about data centers. These are massive computing machines. Imagine the kind of heat that they're generating. What is that impact on global warming, right? Like on climate change. So all they were doing, they're saying we should be asking this question, we should be trying to answer. She was fired for raising that. So there's that. And then 40% of AI startups in Europe, and I'm sure it's probably even worse in the United States, 40% of them don't even use AI. They tell you it's AI, but behind it's just person sitting in some country that they couldn't even find on a map, who's doing the data labeling, who's doing a lot of the work, because these models are not perfect. These models, some of them don't even work. It's still cheaper to just hire a human being and a desperate human being in another country who cannot afford they can't find any other work, and just hiring them for just very cheaply. So there you have it. So that's what's happening behind the scenes. And to summarize, I will leave the summary just online because we only have a few minutes. Oh, why not? Let me just go through this quick recap. 10 takeaways. If you didn't remember anything, at least you can go back and look at these 10. Say, okay, this is what we learned today. One, remember, it's not a thing. AI is not a thing. It's not magic. It is a discipline. It's a broad discipline under computer science. It is an evolution. We came a long, long way. This was back in the 50s when Alan Turing asked the first question, can machines think? And we've had computing for long before that. So it went from manual hand coding, where a lot of women were involved, but ignored, to machines who don't require explicit programming. Generative AI is a subset. We also call it Gen AI. It's a subset of deep learning. There are some like Bard that use search results, but that's not typical. GAN, you'll keep hearing those words. It's good to know what those words mean. It's like learning a new language. You need to know what the vocabulary is, how to help engage in that conversation, or at the very basic, like understand what's going on. So like we talked about, the GANs have two neural nets. They're constantly like, working together against each other. They're adversarial, right? So they're always trying to find the best version of the image and keep getting better and better. And that's how they create these amazing looking deep fake images. Generative pre-trained transformer, anytime you see GPT, now you know what that means. So that is the large language model based on the transformer architecture and the paper for which I shared with you. Keep going to the sixth one. Gen AI models can create, what did we look at? So many things, right? They can create text, they can create images, code, tasks, videos. We looked at so many examples today. Again, you're only limited by your imagination. A prompt is a small piece of text that helps generative AI models understand what's being requested. You can get better and better doing this prompts, and I feel like there's an art and skill to it. But again, that is something that is definitely required as you work or use these models. Benefits of Gen AI, we already talked about it. We went through the entire list of different applications where it can be used, but we also looked at what the downsides were. Embedded biases, it can give you a lot of fake information, and in this, if with there's a lot of concerns are right now are that if, and we'll talk about it in the next class, which is safety on safety. With the elections coming up, there is a greater risk and concerns around a lot of misinformation that's going to be generated by artificial intelligence, like generated by these models. And therein lies the challenge. So more about it next week. And then the last but not the least, the deeper issues are more pertaining to humans who are not necessarily developing these models, but humans who are contributors, unwilling contributors sometimes to these models, but they're not the beneficiaries. They're contributing content, not getting anything in return. The impact of on the environment, or the human beings who are doing the work behind the scenes, and we don't even know it, but we think it's magic, right? When we look at it, or it's sold to us as magic. So there we go. And next week, we'll talk about how do you keep yourself safe, and not just how you keep yourself safe from these technologies, but also there are jobs that are being displaced. Like how do you find out what's going on with that, and how do you continue to reskill? We'll talk about that. But then there are robot dogs in your communities that are coming out. There's surveillance cameras. Like there's so many different ways AI is being deployed around us. We'll have a nice, honest conversation about what are all these different applications, how do they affect us, and how do they affect our communities, how can we keep ourselves safe. And now, yeah, I highly, highly encourage all of you, test and try. I have so many examples in my resources. There are tools you can use. You can go in there and you can start using them. They're free. Test, 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 so that you can have a much better understanding of how these tools work. If you want to become skilled as a programmer, Python is most popular. I would start there. Again, there are free courses out there, and libraries are free books. Just go in there and pick up a book on programming, or even I have a reading list. You can pick up books again from that reading list. If you want to do more statistics work, R is recommended. That might be another option for you, but you don't have to be a programmer. This is again if you wanted to, or you don't have to learn coding. This is only if you're interested in it. So here are your resources. I have a bi-weekly newsletter that goes out every Friday. I try to when I travel my schedule. It all depends on my schedule, but it's completely free. I do it because I read a lot and I like to share. So every week on Fridays, you'll get a newsletter which tells you what you need to know, what's happening in the space, what's happening in AI, without any of the hype. Like, oh, I don't work for a tech company. I'm not trying to sell you anything. It makes no difference to me one way or another if you do use something or not use it. It doesn't benefit me, but I do want everybody to stay safe. I do want everybody to be better informed about these technologies. And hopefully, maybe you'll start a career out of it. I never know. But at the very least, you can keep yourself safe. So there we are. This was me, Mia Shavan. And that's my email address, diversityinai@gmail.com. If you want to stay around, I'm happy to take questions. We can have an open discussion for the next 10, 15 minutes because it is 10 p.m. here. So I won't be able to stay too long, but I'm happy to have a conversation or answer questions.